It's widely accepted that a modern multi-layered air defense system is capable of stopping any coordinated drone strike. But it was precisely this belief that proved to be the fatal mistake of the Russian command at Kerch. Within minutes, Ukraine didn't just breach the defensive perimeter, it methodically destroyed two strategic assets that Russia believed were safely concealed in the most heavily protected zone in Crimea. And it did so using a trap that Russian detection systems didn't have time to identify. At 5:21 a.m. local time, an apparent calm hung over the Kerch naval base. In well-guarded waters, two cable-laying vessels were at anchor, the Volga and the Vyatka, belonging to Project 15310. The combined value of these ships was approximately $900 million, but the stakes went far beyond money. Both vessels were critical links in Russia's underwater communications, intelligence, and surveillance system in the Black Sea. Their mission, to lay cables and maintain the Garmonaya hydroacoustic network through which Russia tracked submarine movements. This was an element of critical importance to both the offensive and defensive operations of the fleet. The Russian commander was convinced the fleet was safe. He didn't know that Ukraine had a different opinion, and just over half an hour to make it known. From the northwest, 14 Ukrainian AN-196 Lyuty drones were approaching the Kerch Strait. They were moving at approximately 160 km per hour in a wide dispersed formation, skimming the sea at an altitude of roughly 67 meters, low enough to disrupt Russian radars. Simultaneously, 6 Magura 5 unmanned boats were racing toward Kerch at full speed from the central part of the Black Sea. 3 of them carried military warheads of approximately 320 kilograms. 2 were decoys. The 6th boat carried electronic warfare equipment generating signals designed to disorient Russian radars. The multi-layered trap was set, silent but deadly. On shore in Odessa, the Ukrainian control group was overseeing the entire operation through the electro-optical sensors of a Bayraktar TB2 circling the area at an altitude of approximately 760 meters. On the targeting screen, the objectives were clearly visible: the Volga and the Vyatka. At 5:31 a.m., exactly 10 minutes after the attack began, the first alert sounded at the Black Sea Fleet Command Center. The Russian watch group had detected 6 signals on radar entering the protection zone from a distance of approximately 80 kilometers. 3 signals were clean. The other 3 flickered amid interference from waves and sea fog. The targets were approaching at high speed. The group immediately ordered their interception. The data was transmitted to the nearest Pantsir S-1 battery. The 1RS-2-1E radar acquired the targets and locked onto them. 4 seconds later, 457E6 missiles launched, tearing through the fog at a speed exceeding 4 times the speed of sound. 3 missiles hit the cleanest signals. 3 Magura 5 boats were destroyed, brilliant red flashes over the sea. But those 3 boats were precisely the decoys, specifically programmed to generate clean signals and draw the fire of the Russian air defense. One of them carried electronic warfare equipment, creating a zone of false signals to mask the real positions of the 3 boats carrying military warheads. The 4th Russian missile detonated inside this jamming zone, destroying nothing but the electronic shadow Ukraine had deliberately prepared for it. While the Pantsir S-1 was spending its ammunition on the trap, the radar detected 14 faint signals coming from the southwest. They were flying low, practically skimming the water, blending into the interference from waves, fog, and the electronic echo of the interception that had just concluded. The automatic classification system couldn't determine with certainty whether these were drones, seabirds, or residual interference. Those few seconds of hesitation proved to be a fatal mistake. Ukraine was counting on exactly that. The 2 destroyed decoy boats had managed, before their destruction, to launch 4 FPV drones each, equipped with electronic warfare modules. The 8 craft immediately activated their mission. They dispersed, hugged the water, activated their jammers, and generated dozens of false signals on Russian radar screens. The Pantsir S-1 opened fire. 8 missiles launched into the fog at a speed exceeding 3 times the speed of sound. 6 FPV drones were destroyed. The two outermost drones escaped the interception zone by hugging the waves, and the pantsir was forced to switch to its 30mm autocannons. Heavy fire at a rate of 5,000 rounds per minute destroyed the two remaining drones before they could penetrate deeper into the defensive zone. Within minutes, Ukraine had forced the pantsir S-1 to spend a significant portion of its ammunition fighting ghosts, and that was precisely the cover it needed. Behind the curtain of interference, the three Magura 5 boats carrying military warheads and the 14 Lyuti continued their approach toward Kerch. High above the Bayraktar TB2 continued circling quietly at 760 meters, transmitting real-time intelligence data and continuously correcting the strike group's trajectories. At 5:48 a.m., Russia played its last card, the Pol-21 electronic warfare system. Its mission to turn the airspace around the Kerch Strait into an invisible cage for Ukrainian drones. The R-340RP jamming modules began simultaneously broadcasting interference from antennas mounted on towers around the defensive zone. The system didn't need to visually detect each drone. It only needed to jam what they relied on: navigation signals. GPS, European Galileo, the Chinese system, all were blocked under a dense dome of electromagnetic interference. On Ukrainian control screens, coordinates began to fluctuate. Trajectories deviated from planned calculations. Two lead Lyuti failed to switch to backup mode in time, lost control for a few seconds, and collided mid-flight. A brief flash in the grey fog, but the remaining 12 Lyuti had been prepared for exactly this. The onboard computers automatically disconnected from the corrupted satellite data and switched to inertial navigation. The drone no longer asked satellites where it was, but calculated its position autonomously, based on heading, speed, acceleration, and data from highly sensitive gyroscopes. Simultaneously, optical terrain correlation mode activated. Cameras and sensors scanned the coastline, dark patches of water, wave patterns, docks, coastal installations, and landmarks loaded into memory before takeoff. The Pol-21 could blind GPS, but it couldn't erase the map already stored in the drone's memory, and it certainly couldn't alter the physical terrain. One by one, the Lyuti hugged the sea surface and continued their advance toward Kerch, guided by inertia, terrain, and a route committed to memory. At 5:52 a.m., Russia played its final card. Two groups of Lancet loitering munitions took off from the Kerch airfield. The first group of 3 targeted the surviving Magura 5 boats. The second, 10 Lancets, went in pursuit of the 12 Lyuti. The tactic immediately yielded results. One Lancet struck a Magura carrying a military warhead, and a column of fire and water rose 27 meters into the air. 2 more Lancets caught up with 2 lead Lyuti, a double flash in the grey sky. But the remaining Magura boats reacted immediately. They accelerated, scattered in different directions, and concealed themselves in the troughs between waves, denying the Lancets a clean target. The Russian commander redirected 2 Lancets from the first group to join the aerial pursuit. The remaining Magura boats were handed off to fleet vessels. The pursuit lasted approximately 5 minutes. The Lancets couldn't maintain the Lyuti's speed and gradually fell behind. The Ukrainian drones escaped the capture zone, but at the cost of their formation breaking apart. The Russian commander saw it. New order: bring the remaining Lancets back to base, transmitting alert data to the entire Crimean defensive perimeter. At 5:58 a.m., 8 Lyuti and 2 Magura 5 boats broke through the main defensive lines of the Kerch Strait and began converging on attack trajectories. The final obstacle turned out to be a Karakurt-class combat vessel guarding the waters. 2 missile launches, 2 flashes in the sky. 2 decoy Lyuti destroyed, but 4 low-flying drones and 2 boats were already entering close combat range. The vessel's pantsir M switched to its 30mm rotary cannons. 1 Magura 5 boat drove straight into the barrage fire, and its warhead detonated, a column of fire and water more than 20 meters high. The shockwave struck the Karakurt's hull. In the chaos, the last Magura 5 boat, accompanied by 2 low-flying Lyuti, slipped through the gap that had been blown open and emerged directly at the anchorage of the Volga and the Vyatka. The Bayraktar TB2 continued circling at 760 meters, transmitting precise targeting data, approach angles, wind direction, anchorage positions, vulnerable points on the hulls. The last Magura 5 boat hugged the water's surface and struck the starboard side of the Volga in its lower section near the waterline, the most vulnerable point of a vessel at anchor. When the warhead detonated, the temperature at the epicenter of the explosion exceeded 2,500 degrees Celsius. The shockwave pierced the steel hull, destroyed the technical compartments, and water flooded into the lower spaces. The electrical system in the area of the auxiliary machinery short-circuited and went dark. Almost simultaneously, the two remaining Liuti attacked the Vyatka from different directions. The first struck the aft section of the deck where the cable-laying equipment was located. The explosion swept across the steel surface, scattered the equipment, and ignited oil and electrical wiring. The second Liuti struck the superstructure, where the antennas, sensors, observation posts, and mission management compartment were concentrated. The antennas were knocked down. The windows of the command compartment were blown out by the shockwave. A large portion of the communications and observation systems was destroyed on the spot. Black smoke rose from the central section of the vessel. The result of the attack, the Volga had sustained a breach at the waterline and was at risk of sinking. The Vyatka had been struck simultaneously on two levels, the technical deck on fire and the superstructure destroyed, with no communications or sensors. One vessel had lost its ability to operate safely, the other had lost its ability to command, observe, and carry out its specialized missions. But Russia's actual losses go far beyond two ships. The Volga and the Vyatka are not transport vessels. They are specialized platforms for cable laying, maintaining hydroacoustic systems, tracking submarines, and working on underwater infrastructure. In the context of sanctions and limited access to components, repairing or replacing them will be a costly, lengthy, and extraordinarily complex undertaking. Every month without these ships means a weakening of the Black Sea Fleet's underwater operational capabilities. The strategic scope of the strike is even more serious. Ukraine didn't attack ordinary military vessels. It is deliberately targeting the entire ecosystem that sustains Russian control over Crimea. Ports, bridges, radars, air defense systems, specialized ships, and underwater surveillance networks. When all of these elements are simultaneously under threat, Crimea stops being a secure rear base and becomes an isolated bridgehead that must be constantly defended. On the operational level, Ukraine demonstrated the effectiveness of the combined strike model. Long-range Liuti drones, Magura, 5 unmanned boats, decoys, jammers, and aerial reconnaissance. Smaller, less expensive platforms with proper coordination forced Russia to expend missiles, split its fire, and expose the gaps in Kerch's multi-layered defense. The psychological effect is equally significant. If even Kerch, the most heavily protected zone in Crimea, remains vulnerable, then no position on the peninsula can be considered absolutely safe. This forces Russia to transfer more and more forces to protect its rear instead of focusing on the front line. For Ukraine, the logic is straightforward. Crimea can be isolated by methodically destroying its critical links, not through a single decisive strike, but through a series of precise attacks, each of which makes defending the peninsula more costly, more complex, and less reliable. Russia's greatest loss is not two ships. It's the loss of the illusion that Crimea remains an impregnable fortress. In your opinion, what was Russia's primary loss in this attack? The destruction of the Volga and the Vyatka, or the very fact that Kerch's defensive system was breached in full view of the Black Sea Fleet? Write your thoughts in the comments. If you're interested in in-depth military analysis of events in Ukraine and the Black Sea, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for our upcoming content.